Hello and welcome to Property Matters. I'm Stephen Galpin, and on today's show we're going to be talking about agency, estate agency that is. Now, I'm guessing that a lot of viewers looking at this programme have had the services of an estate agent through their time, and some of those experiences will be good and bad. And what I want to do today is just look at how the estate agency business has gone on a journey over the last 10 or 15 years, quite a high-tech journey. And I have somebody with me today who is the ideal person to help us on this journey examination. And it's David Linley, previous CEO of Fine & Country, and now running a network of estate agencies nationwide through his new company, By Design. Welcome to you.
Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, great to have you here. I don't know if you're going to like everything I say about estate agency, but I've been one myself, so I'm not.
Takes one to know one, yeah?
Yeah, I'm not going to be too critical. Okay, but I want to go back about 10 years, and looking at that time, 10 years ago, or even further back, the structure of agency was quite simple. You had your large corporate multi-office agencies. They would effectively control the higher end of the market in the better areas of the town or the city. And your smaller independent agent would probably pick up the pieces in the periphery.
Sure.
Now, that has started to change, and I suppose the catalyst for that change was the introduction of the portals. And those portals were the sort of multi-point connectors for all those agencies to have sort of new marketing ideas, getting rid of the old Cardex, you know, things in the office and the disciplines of phoning 10 people a day on a cold call. So, David, when did your involvement in agencies start?
Probably started around 2010, something like that. So a little bit before the time you're talking about them, but there or thereabouts. And I think that in that time, as you say, there has been some changes, and there's almost been waves within a state agency. I think there's been a corporate wave, and then following that, there was an online wave, maybe turned into a bit of a bubble at times as well.
We'll come to that one.
We'll come to that.
Yeah.
And I think the current wave we're on is on interestingly, a self-employed wave. So come back to your point there about the corporate one. I think especially as far as the premium market is concerned, there was always and I think this is changing, I think you're right, there was a perception that the larger corporate household names in the premium market had a black book of buyers that was not accessible to anyone else, and they kept the best buyers back for themselves. And if you had a premium home, say £1 million home, you'd have to go to them. That is, if it was the case, it's no longer the case, because, and I think where this is changing as well is the market's become a bit democratized in a way. So you have smaller agents that are there a bit more, dare I say, agile, nimble, their marketing is more creative, and the rate of change of marketing is increased, even the last few years since COVID as well. And the rate of the quality of marketing, especially videography and adapting those for various ratios, even for social media, has come on leaps and bounds. Even on things where, you know, give you an example of this would be drone videography. Back in the day, that would have been a camera on a pole on the back of a van or something. Sure. And then it would be specialized operators that would have a drone. And now, you know, anyone can go out and buy a drone and away they go. And now even we're seeing the next wave of that, which is I think it's called a first person view drone, which actually goes through a property and out the other side and is very dramatic. So anyway, I think that you've got the leveling of the playing field that, as you say, the portals provide, and then in often cases, real superior quality and attention to detail that comes to the marketing of smaller independent agents.
Yeah, interesting. You talk about these sort of areas of expertise at various levels of the agency market. I mean, it's a little bit like you picked up the point, which, okay, the bigger corporates tended to get the higher value properties. And it's a little bit like my background is in new build developments, a lot of these 70-story buildings here and one thing and another. And I didn't quite get it at first when I started. And I'd have developers, they'd want these superb brochures, some of them costing 30, 40, 50 pounds a pop, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd always been taught that a brochure will never sell a property. But the value of these 30, 40, 50 pound brochures was that the customer would take it home after having reserved the property, put it on the coffee table, and that was the showpiece for the neighbours and everybody else. So it never actually fulfilled the function you thought it might.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also think that applies to actually some of the corporate agencies, because I don't think some of them were actually that good at selling the bigger properties. I mean, I can remember a couple of the big agencies down here in London, when we started selling blocks of 50 and 60 stories, they were sort of referring to them as multi-height purpose-built units, sort of things like that. They just hadn't quite grasped what it was all about.
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned drones. I can remember what a revelation it was when, if you were selling off plan, you could actually send a drone up to the actual height of where a window might be going to be when somebody says, well, what's the view like from the 50th floor?
Yeah.
And having not even built it yet or even probably thought about it, you could show them.
Yeah.
So quite amazing. And I don't think it's a bad thing that the industry has progressed in that way. I think it's helped a lot of things. I think it's helped planning applications to get, bird's eye view of things. And this progress is all very good. And I know that part of your ethos is to encourage agencies to look at the higher end of the market and perhaps advise them and supply them with aids that will take them into that higher level. And typically, what would that be?
I think you're really right. There is a perception. So quite often when I'm speaking to an estate agent who's not in the premium market, they would have the assumption that the toughest nuts to crack as far as a competitor would be are the agents that we will think about, the typical household names of the premium world. In fact, that's very, very rarely the case. They can be easier to target because, and this is a bit of a sweeping generalization, but not without some underlying data to it, but their service levels and therefore their withdrawal rates are higher than it would be when instead a tougher competitor would be a well-established independent agent in that premium market. They are much tougher to unpick. I'm sure there's millions of reasons underneath that, but it invariably seems to be the case.
Well, I used to work for a developer, and he always used to say that, look, you'll sell nothing without your local agent. And he used to have an amazing sort of modus operandi with the local agents. The negotiator, the moment he got an exchange, would find a 50-inch TV on his desk, or 2 tickets for Barbados, or whatever else. And it was just I was a bit shattered with this. I thought, I wish I was earning that sort of money and that kind of thing, and I wasn't. But it just worked amazingly well, and it was this direct encouragement of the local agent, and more often than not, it was not in a corporate, chain. It would be a small independent. Yeah. I think that's good.
Yeah, it's very hard to beat that local connection.
Well, I think it is. Now, look, 10 years ago to the year came along what were called market disruptors of a certain type of brick, of a certain type of colour.
Very well put.
And this was quite a phenomenon, wasn't it, really? It took everybody by surprise. The 2 guys that launched that particular business were very well-known entrepreneurs, very bright people. Yeah. And within a very short space of time, that business became valued at £1 billion, I think on the AIM market, if I remember right.
Yeah,
I don't think it was on the full market, was it? But it also tumbled to be worth £1. So what went wrong there?
Far be it for me to say there are much brighter minds than mine that would analyse that. My own theory on it is a couple of things. One is, at the bottom of a business like that's 2 very simple metrics. There's the cost of acquisition and there's lifetime value of a customer. And as long as the lifetime value of a customer was higher than the cost of acquisition of acquiring them in the first place, then you're onto a good thing. And when those started to change, it was different. And there is a correlation between a very expensive marketing tap being turned on or off and those kind of companies' market share. The other thing, though, is I remember hearing once that the best kind of business is where one customer buys 100 times. And the worst kind of business is where you have 100 customers buying once. And typically in the property market, where people move house, every 8-10 years, and that number's going up as well, then it's all right for us because we're living and breathing it every day, but other people have got their lives to live. We're doing much more interesting things than moving house. So there almost comes a re-education at that point that needs to be done. So that is a harder thing to do than it would be if they were regularly transacting on a similar basis. Whether the service was good or bad or indifferent for those kind of companies, I don't know. I've never actually used them myself, so it'd be hard to say. I think that it was a bit of a looming spectre in the entire market at the time, and a lot of estate agents feared that they would go the way of your travel agents, things like that. It never really came to be. And probably going back to the previous point you just said, very hard to beat a local estate agent.
Well, I think it is. I think local knowledge is everything. Yeah. I mean, I know in the life I had in agency, I had a lady in one of the posher parts of the West End of London that ran an office. Oh dear, she smoking in the office. Her pet dog was on the floor, and she had to break at lunch to feed the dog and take it away.
Yeah.
But that lady knew everybody in the streets around her. She knew who was having a baby, who was moving, who was having to travel abroad, who was thinking of selling, who was thinking of buying. I mean, she was like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
And I think that the likes of the coloured brick regime missed out on that and ignored it. And I think they ignored it at their peril. It is a complex business, and I don't think we should ever forget that you are dealing with hundreds of thousands of pounds in terms of an asset, if not millions of pounds. And I think sometimes there's been a tendency in the past to just overlook that point and forget what the worth of that value is. I mean, I used to run a lot of new home sales operations. And one of the favourite things is you have one of your negotiators come and he says, "Boss, can I knock 50 or 100,000 pounds off this?" And I say, "Well, why is that? What do I get?" "What do you mean? What do you get?" I say, "Well, you're asking me to throw away 100,000 pounds. What do I get for it? What's coming my way?" Yeah. "Oh, well, I'm not really sure about it." I say, "Well, how long does it take you to earn 100,000 pounds?" Because it takes me quite a while. Perhaps you're different to me. I don't know. Yeah. And it's this lack of understanding that the rather more unqualified members of our profession sort of fall down on. Really, do you find that in your agency offices today?
The qualifications is a difficult one, isn't it? Because there's, I think, ROPA and the regulation of agents that is due to be coming in or not, and that's been through an absolute quagmire.
I've been listening to that for 40 years.
What do you think? Do you reckon we're getting there with that or not?
Estate Agents Act of 1929 or 39? I can't remember that.
Do you think we're getting anywhere with ROPA? Do you think it's a good thing?
The thing that makes me nervous about government interference, whether it's in planning, whether it's in regulation, whether it's in renter reform or anything else, I'm not sure that the people who are supposedly enacting the legislation have a comprehensive understanding of what they're doing. And I question sometimes as to where they get their information from. The tendency is to go to the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors for this sort of information because they're considered a rock solid body, which they are. But if you look in every agency office around the country, it's only actually percentage-wise, you're very few that will have an RICS qualified member in that team. So actually, for the sort of things we're talking about, you're better off going to the high street agents, even some of the independents, for that on-the-ground information. RICS aren't going to have it.
Yeah.
That's the worry I have about legislation.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that over the hesitations in the Rental Reform Act and the Leasehold Reform Act, all the things that are going through. I mean, some of the mistakes in that are shocking, but I do accept things need to be done.
Yeah, I agree. There is, I think most of the industry would be quite up for the regulation because it would raise standards and do more to enhance the reputation, I think, of the industry. there is a query of where the cost comes, because if you're going to be regulated, someone has to check something.
Somebody has to have a look, don't
Yeah,
they?
and they've got to be paid from somewhere. So that's an interesting question. And there's also the question over whether or not, the best agents out there that are doing the best service should be charging an appropriate fee for that, and the customers that are seeking that higher level of service pay for it accordingly.
Yeah. David, one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, we have a situation now, like in a lot of industries. I've been a magistrate for heaven knows how long, and the court lists now are just incredible. They were saying this morning on the news that it can now take up to 4 years to get to court
I heard that.
certain criminal matters, and it's right. And as magistrates, some of them will tell you you can probably have 30 or 40 cases in a day.
Yeah.
Now you've got to whack through them, but on the other hand, you've got to make sure that justice is done. Very difficult balance. And we've got the same kind of problem with conveyancing. And I think one of the things that, especially in new homes sales, people don't understand. Yeah, great, you've got a reservation, you've taken a couple of £1,000 deposit, lovely. That's the easy bit. The next bit is getting it over the line. And it's now taking 6 to 8 months to get an exchange. And why is that? Why are agents having this struggle?
Yeah, it's a real problem, and it's a real problem, and then it's also increasing fall throughs as well, which is just disappointing. Somebody's going to be disappointed there somewhere when a sale falls through, not least of all the agent, but there are customers buying and selling houses in there as well. And I think that because it's taking so long, with every day that goes past, there's another opportunity for something to happen. Even if it's outside of the control of the party who decides to pull out, for a sale to fall through. It is very difficult. There is no simple answer to that, unless someone in government really gets it by the scruff of the neck and has a hook, line and sinker reform of it. There are companies out there that are doing some really great things to do their best within the confines of the current system to enhance things and make things better. Companies that would involve things like reservation agreements, which almost bring it a little bit more into line with the Scottish system, for example, which is no bad thing when you look at their fall through rates compared to ours.
When you say it, you've done it.
Exactly.
That's the key there, isn't it?
So it should be as well. But
yeah.
Anyway, there we go. So no, it is a real challenge for the industry, and of course, for notwithstanding the emotional distress that would put the buyer or the seller through, there's also the business implications that has to the estate agent. They've still got their wage bill to pay at the end of the month. They've still got all their monthly costs, but a transaction now will churn on the timeline you said, rather than 3 months, as it was not so long ago.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to somebody in the States the other day, and they were absolutely horrified.
Oh, they can't believe it.
No, how long?
Yeah.
We can do it the next day.
And at what fee?
Yeah, and what do I need a solicitor for?
Yeah.
No, I mean that is a point. I mean, I have got a bit of a solution which I've had this sort
of
as a bee in my bonnet for years, which is I would empower land registry to collate all the information, contaminated land, Environment Agency studies for flooding and all that sort of thing, all the data, put it all into the land registry and fund it by having solicitors pay into that as a license, if you like. Now, what that would mean is that anybody looking for their searches, for their information, because there's no question that in the last 5 years in particular, lenders are asking more and more questions of their surveyors and the solicitors on the inquiry boards. So it's getting more and more complex. So a single shop point to get all this information, I think, would help tremendously. How many times do you hear a solicitor say, "Oh, I'm just waiting for searches, 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks," and "Oh, crikey, you're in this county or that county," and all that. I mean, it's, I also think, in terms of resales, another little danger area is where constructors, developers, in the past, I think it's lesser now because of the restrictions on it, but have held on to freeholds in the past. And what they've done, they've held on to freeholds. They've not really been properly geared to manage, but they get by. And then, of course, people want to sell. And they're very slow to put together the information and that person, even though it's their tenant, their long-term tenant, they're very slow to pass over those inquiries. and packages.
I lived in a property like that, and when I came to sell it, experienced exactly what you're talking about. Very difficult. And then you get other residents asking each other for help because it's so slow to get going. So I can sympathise.
And you know, if you know, those particular landlords become famous for it, and they sort of say, "Oh, crikey, no, you're not selling in there, are you?" I can't bear it.
What was the fee again?
And you know, it all costs money, and you know, you talk about dropout rates going up. I'm not surprised. You know, you think you might want to buy a new car. When you think about it, you then maybe get nearly to the point of ordering it, and then they say, "Oh, it's a 3 months wait," and you think, "Do I want to wait 3 months? And is there something else?" And I don't see why you know we can't understand that thought process goes through in the property industry.
Yeah. Someone told me once, time kills all deals. And I believe that. And you can see that in the property market. Anything could come up, positive or negative. Someone could lose a job, gain a job, change circumstance, change in family, change in relationship, or they find something better.
No, it's right. But I do think this time lag does need addressing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it does fall in the lap of the agent to see that through, doesn't it? And good training in that area. Now, look, the next thing I just want to touch on is this change in agency personnel structure. We've come into this, nobody wants to call themselves an estate agent anymore. They want to call themselves a broker, don't they? Which I guess we've picked up from America, haven't we? Yeah, okay. And what this broker means, it means somebody who's working on their own as a broker, self-employed, sometimes, in fairness, under the umbrella of a bigger organisation. Now, David, the worry I have about this is there's no control over that person's capability. There's no checking. There's no control or no.
As opposed to.
Well,
I mean, in a high street agency, is there any checks?
When you're working in an agency, if you're working in any company that's worth its own, you will have an office manager. You will have a general manager who will watch what you're doing. They will watch what you're saying. They will watch what you're sending out in letters and emails and having a look. But when somebody's on their own, I'm sure to some people it's a fantastic incentive and a fantastic opportunity. Wouldn't want to knock that for the world. But
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you know, a lot of people would look at the industry and say anyone can come from, you know, whatever circumstance, almost roll out of prison one day and be an estate agent another, and it's as simple as that.
They wouldn't have to wait a day.
There's no qualification for it. So the industry is all in the same boat as far as that's concerned. And I think that if people are going to act unscrupulously, they're going to act unscrupulously, regardless of the structure that they're in. I've seen what I will say is that use the word brokerages. In America, obviously, a brokerage is the company umbrella over which they would engage with their realtors, estate agents, there, and they would deal with the legal and the compliance on behalf of the realtors. What happens here when you typically have self-employed agents, as they're called now, is they will work within, we don't really call them brokerages, maybe we should start because that's effectively what they become, but within brands, companies, umbrella organizations, and they'll do a lot of the compliance through them. So it's a funny thing, it's not something that I've ever really encountered. I wouldn't say that members of the public are more or less safe with regards to dealing with an estate agent who might not be of the highest caliber. But I think that's where you need to look at the market as a competitive landscape. So see the agents who are succeeding, who have good reviews, good reputations, good social profiles. You meet with them, trust them, they do what they say they're going to do. It's those kind of things which is going to probably bear fruit more than just trusting a name above the door because it's on a high street somewhere and you hope a general manager's doing something they may or may not be doing.
Okay. The last question I want to ask you, or the last subject I want you to comment on, where's it all going? Are we going back? Are we going backwards 10 years and going to go back to the corporates, back to this sort of perhaps these days more aggressive and more competent, smaller independent agent, or are we going down this digital online
Yeah, good question. So undeniably at the moment, since 2019, there's been a 600% increase in the market share of self-employed agents in the UK. So kind of undeniably, that's a trend or a direction that's hard to put to one side. And born through a load of different reasons, the opportunity, the average salaries in roles in a estate agency and so on. Technology is, AI is disrupting lots of industries. I think probably for us, to be fair, it's not going to disrupt that much because it is very much, it's funny, you talk to the best agents and they say it's actually not about property, it's about people. And it is very much a people business. As you know, you've been there and done it, and the property is the product, and it's actually the people that you're dealing with. So where technology can help is almost coming back to something you said quite early on in this conversation as well, is for example, doing the heavy lifting of administrative tasks in the background, or customer identification. So you're saying about hammering the phone and making cold calls. Well, really, in this day and age, that should be a thing of the past.
Sure.
And agents can use technology to identify the customers it's worth having a conversation with, rather than people you're just pestering for no reason whatsoever.
Okay, David Linley, thank you very much for coming on the show today. You've been an absolute mine of information. Thank you for taking us on the journey through the estate agency industry. Thank you for watching. Join me again next time on Property Matters.